My name is Rose, a 28-year-old quantum physicist with nothing more than a small lab and big dreams. When my breakthrough finally came, my father laughed across the family dinner table. "Your little experiment is worthless," he declared, sliding papers toward me to sign away my rights. He never believed a daughter could accomplish what brilliant men couldn't. What he didn't know was that my phone was silently buzzing with news that would change everything. Let me know where you're watching from, and hit that subscribe button if you've ever had someone underestimate your potential. Trust me, what happened next is worth sticking around for. I grew up in Lexington, a small town outside Boston where autumn leaves turned our streets into gold every September. Our two-story colonial house stood on Maple Street, just as my father's expectations towered firmly over my childhood dreams. Thomas Williams, my father, built his construction business from scratch, turning a small contracting company into one of the largest commercial builders in Massachusetts. He wore success like his tailored suits, precisely measured and always on display. "Business is predictable, Rose," he would say during Sunday dinners. "You invest, you build, you sell. Science is for dreamers who never make real money." My mother, Catherine, once a promising accountant at a prestigious firm, had long ago abandoned her career ambitions to become the supportive wife my father expected. She managed our household with the same precision she once applied to corporate ledgers. Her silent complicity in my father's dismissal of my interests became its own kind of betrayal over the years. "Listen to your father, Rose," became her mantra, spoken so often that I sometimes wondered if she remembered ever having her own opinions. My fascination with quantum physics began when I was 10 years old. My fifth-grade teacher, Mrs. Sanchez, brought a prism to class and showed us how white light contained all the colors of the rainbow. While other kids saw pretty colors, I saw questions. What made light behave that way? How could something be both a particle and a wave? I checked out every book our small-town library had on physics, sitting cross-legged on my bedroom floor, surrounded by pages of equations I couldn't yet understand, but somehow felt deeply connected to. For my first science fair in 6th grade, I built a rudimentary double-slit experiment using cardboard, aluminum foil, a laser pointer, and my father's tape measure. While other kids made baking soda volcanoes, I was demonstrating light interference patterns. The judges, 2 science teachers and our principal, stood stunned as I explained concepts most high schoolers hadn't yet mastered. "Where did you learn all this?" asked Mr. Peterson, the head judge. "Books," I answered simply. I won first place. My father skipped the ceremony for a business meeting. High school became less about the social hierarchy most teenagers navigate and more about a series of stepping stones toward my growing obsession. While classmates went to football games and house parties, I volunteered at the university physics lab 20 miles away, taking 3 buses every Saturday morning to clean equipment in exchange for watching graduate students conduct experiments. Professor Janet Miller, the first female physicist I ever met, noticed my dedication. "You don't just want to watch, do you?" she asked, one day after catching me studying a quantum entanglement experiment setup. She began letting me assist with data collection, treating me as a colleague rather than just a high school volunteer. The divide between my family's expectations and my academic interests grew deeper with each passing year. When college acceptance letters arrived, MIT offered me a full scholarship based on my advanced physics projects. My father's response cut deep. "4 years wasted on theories that won't put food on the table," he said, pushing aside my acceptance letter to show me brochures for business schools. "Harvard Business has a legacy program. My donation could get you in the door." "I want MIT," I insisted, one of the few times I directly opposed him. "Then you're on your own," he replied. I left for Cambridge with 2 suitcases and determination that hardened my resolve through 4 challenging years. I graduated summa cum laude, my parents attending the ceremony with tight smiles and minimal congratulations. My decision to pursue a PhD, rather than join the real world, as my father put it, further strained our already tenuous relationship. My doctoral focus became quantum entanglement applications, specifically how entangled particles might revolutionize computing and secure communications. Most established professors dismissed my proposals as too theoretical, too ambitious, or simply unlikely to yield practical results. Quantum computing is 20 years away, and always will be, one advisor told me, chuckling at his own overused joke. But I saw something others missed. Through meticulous experiments and mathematical modeling, I began developing a theory that quantum entanglement could be stabilized at room temperature under specific conditions, something the scientific community considered nearly impossible. If proven true, it would eliminate one of the biggest barriers to practical quantum technology. Just like at home, I grew accustomed to being underestimated. And just like at home, I used that underestimation as fuel. My research lab wasn't much to look at, a converted storage room in the physics building's basement with outdated equipment and flickering fluorescent lights that hummed constantly. The university had assigned me the space almost as an afterthought, while other doctoral candidates received the newer facilities upstairs. Yet within those dingy walls, something extraordinary was taking shape. I had covered one wall with whiteboards, my equations sprawling across them in what my few visitors called beautiful chaos. My desk overflowed with journals, printouts, and components for experimental apparatus, many of which I built myself from modified consumer electronics when grant money couldn't stretch to professional equipment. Professor Daniels was the only faculty member who didn't dismiss my theories outright. A veteran physicist nearing retirement, he had the freedom that comes with an established career to support unconventional research. "They laughed at Einstein too, you know," he told me during one of our weekly meetings, his eyes twinkling behind thick glasses. "Not that I'm comparing you to Einstein yet." His encouragement kept me going through failed experiments and rejected grant applications. While other doctoral candidates collaborated in groups, I worked mostly alone, refining my approach to quantum entanglement stabilization through hundreds of minor adjustments and late nights. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday at 2:15 in the morning. I had been running variations of the same experiment for 72 hours straight, sleeping on the lab couch in 3-hour increments. My modified apparatus, part quantum computer, part superconducting circuit, had been producing inconsistent results all week. But this time, something changed. The entangled photons maintained their quantum state for 8.44 seconds, orders of magnitude longer than the previous record. I checked and rechecked the measurements, certain I had made an error. When the third test confirmed the results, I sat back in my chair, heart pounding. "Oh my God," I whispered to the empty lab. "It's working!" What I had theorized was actually happening. The quantum bits were maintaining their entangled state at room temperature using my specialized containment field. If scaled, this technology could revolutionize everything from computing to secure communications to medical imaging. I called Professor Daniels at 4 a.m., not caring about the hour. "Rose," he answered groggily. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong," I said, my voice shaking with excitement. "Everything's right. Can you come to the lab?" He arrived 45 minutes later in mismatched clothes, his white hair uncombed. I showed him the data, explained the experimental modifications, and ran the test again while he watched. When the results appeared on screen, confirming stability once more, he removed his glasses and wiped his eyes. "This is it," he said simply. "This changes everything." Over the next week, we repeated the experiment with variations, documenting every aspect methodically. The results held. What I discovered wasn't just an incremental improvement, it was a fundamental breakthrough that could make practical quantum technology a reality years ahead of predictions. Professor Daniels insisted we meet with the university's technology transfer office immediately. "You need to patent this before someone else figures it out," he urged. "This isn't just academic anymore. This has serious commercial potential." The meeting with the technology transfer director, Martin Weber, was my first glimpse into how the world might respond to my discovery. He listened to our explanation, reviewed our preliminary data, and immediately called in 2 colleagues.
If this works at scale, we're talking about revolutionary applications, communications, medicine, national security, finance. Every industry that requires computing power or secure data would be interested. How interested? Professor Daniels asked pointedly. Weber exchanged glances.
Potentially billions if the patents are properly structured. We need to move quickly, Weber continued. I'll have our legal team draft provisional patent applications. In the meantime, absolute confidentiality is essential. As I left the meeting, clutching a folder of non-disclosure agreements and preliminary patent documents, a strange thought occurred to me. For the first time in my life, my father might actually be impressed by my impractical scientific pursuits. I called my mother that evening, something I rarely did, since our conversations usually centered on why I wasn't visiting more often or when I planned to settle down. "Mom," I said when she answered, "I've made a breakthrough with my research. It's really important. I'd like to come to dinner this Sunday and tell everyone about it." "That's nice, dear," she replied distantly. "Your father's been asking when you'll visit. I'll make your favorite lasagna." The drive to my parents' house that Sunday felt different. Instead of the usual dread, I felt a glimmer of hope that finally, my family might see value in my work. I brought copies of the preliminary data and patent applications, nearly forgetting Professor Daniels' warnings about confidentiality in my eagerness to share my achievement. As I parked in their driveway, staring at the familiar colonial house where I had grown up, I allowed myself to imagine my father's proud expression when he understood what I had accomplished. Maybe this would be the bridge that finally connected us after years of disappointment and misunderstanding. Little did I know, the dinner ahead would shatter that hope more completely than I could have imagined. Sunday dinners at my parents' house had followed the same ritual since I was a child. 6 o'clock sharp, in the formal dining room. My mother's good china set out perfectly, even though we were just family. My father sat at the head of the table, my mother to his right, always ready to refill his glass or fetch something from the kitchen before he even asked. I arrived 15 minutes early, the folder of research documents tucked under my arm. My brother Alex's car was already in the driveway. 2 years younger than me, Alex had followed our father's preferred path, earning a business degree and joining the family construction company. His willingness to fulfill our father's expectations had always cast my academic rebellion in starker contrast. "Rose," my mother greeted me at the door with a quick hug. She smelled of rosemary and garlic. "You look tired. Are you sleeping enough?" Before I could answer, Alex appeared in the hallway. "The prodigal scientist returns," he said with a smirk. We had been close as children, but his loyalty to our father had created distance between us over the years. "Good to see you too," I replied, trying to keep my tone light. Today wasn't about old tensions. Today was about sharing my success. My father emerged from his study last, greeting me with a perfunctory kiss on the cheek. "Rose, you've lost weight. Your mother will fix that tonight." We moved to the dining room where my mother had outdone herself with lasagna, garlic bread, and an elaborate salad. As we settled into our seats, the familiar family dynamic reasserted itself immediately. My father dominated the conversation, talking about recent construction contracts and a potential expansion of the business into Rhode Island. My mother nodded supportively, asking occasional questions designed to highlight his accomplishments. "We just secured the Johnson account," my father announced, serving himself a second helping of lasagna. $15 million project, biggest of the quarter. "That's wonderful, dear," my mother said. "Alex put together the final presentation," my father added proudly. "Showed real business instinct." Alex straightened in his chair, basking in the praise. "Just applied what you taught me, Dad." I waited for a natural pause in the conversation, my heart racing slightly. "I actually have some news too," I said, reaching for the folder beside my plate. "I've made a breakthrough in my research." My father's expression didn't change. "Oh, another paper published in some journal nobody reads." I pushed past the sting of his words. "Actually, it's much bigger than that. I've developed a method to stabilize quantum entanglement at room temperature. The university is filing patents." 3 blank faces stared back at me. "What does that mean in English?" Alex asked. I took a deep breath. "It means I've solved one of the biggest problems in quantum technology."
Computers thousands of times faster than current ones, unbreakable encryption, medical imaging that could detect diseases at the cellular level before symptoms appear. My father set down his fork. "And this makes money? How exactly?" "The Technology Transfer Office thinks it could be worth billions," I said, the words still feeling strange in my mouth. "Companies like IBM, Google, the Defense Department, they're all investing heavily in quantum technology." My father laughed. It wasn't a warm laugh. "Billions for your little experiment, Rose? Be realistic." "I am being realistic," I insisted, pulling out the preliminary documents. "Here's the patent application. The university is already fielding inquiries from tech companies." He glanced at the papers without really looking at them. "Universities are always claiming some research will change the world, then nothing happens." He passed the documents to my mother, who set them aside without reading them. "Your little experiment is worthless," he declared flatly. "If you want to make real money, you should have gone into business like your brother." The dismissal hit harder than I expected. Even with everything I'd accomplished, nothing had changed. I excused myself to use the bathroom, needing a moment alone to compose myself. As I walked down the hallway, I heard my father's voice from the dining room, unusually animated. Curious, I paused near the doorway. "Call James tomorrow," my father was saying quietly. "Tell him we may have something interesting for quantum solutions after all." "You think her research is legitimate?" Alex asked. "Doesn't matter," my father replied. "James has been looking to acquire intellectual property in quantum computing. If the university is filing patents, there must be something to it. We can position ourselves as early investors." My blood ran cold. James Harrington was my father's college friend who now ran Quantum Solutions, a tech company known for acquiring and sometimes burying competing technologies. And my father was planning to sell my research without even telling me. I returned to the dining room, trying to mask my shock. As I sat down, my father reached beside his chair and pulled out a leather portfolio I hadn't noticed before. "Actually, Rose, I had some paperwork drawn up," he said casually, extracting several documents. "Since you mentioned your research last week on the phone, I thought this might be the perfect opportunity for the family business to diversify into technology." I hadn't mentioned my research on the phone. The realization hit me. He'd been planning this before I even arrived. Someone at the university must have told him about my breakthrough. "These papers would establish Williams Family Holdings as the commercial entity representing your intellectual property," he continued, sliding the documents across the table. "We'd handle all the negotiations, marketing, and business development. You could focus on your research without worrying about the commercial aspects." "You want me to sign over my rights?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. "It's a family partnership," he corrected smoothly. "We'd manage the business side, which you have no experience with. Alex would serve as CEO of the new division." Alex had the decency to look slightly uncomfortable, but said nothing. "We're offering a 70-30 split," my father continued. 70% to Williams Holdings, 30% to you, considering you'd have no responsibilities beyond technical consultation. "That's generous." I stared at the contract in disbelief. Not only was he trying to take control of my work, but he was offering me less than a third of its value, while making my brother, who knew nothing about quantum physics, the CEO. "I need time to think about this," I said carefully. "What's there to think about?" my father pressed. "You've never had a head for business, Rose. This way, the whole family benefits." My mother finally spoke up. "Your father knows what's best, dear. He's just trying to help you." In that moment, I realized how deep the betrayal went. This wasn't just about my father's controlling nature. This was a coordinated effort to take advantage of my work while I was still vulnerable, before the full value had been established. The 3 of them, my family, had discussed this plan without me. I'm not signing anything tonight, I said firmly, standing up. I need to consult with the university's legal team first. My father's expression hardened. Don't be difficult, Rose. This is a good deal. Most scientific research never makes a penny. Then you shouldn't be interested in worthless experiments, I replied, gathering my documents. I need to go. As I walked toward the door, my father called after me. Think carefully before you turn this down. I have connections at MIT. One call about family financial interest in your research could complicate those patent applications. The threat hung in the air as I left the perfect family dinner, shattered by naked greed and betrayal. The drive back to Cambridge was a blur. Tears threatened to spill over, but I forced them back, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. This wasn't the time for crying. This was the time for action. I called Professor Daniels from my car using the hands-free system, my voice shaking with urgency. They're trying to take it. My father had papers drawn up to claim ownership rights. He's threatening to contact MIT. Slow down, Rose, Professor Daniels replied in his calm voice, a stark contrast to my panic. Who's trying to take what? My family, my research. My father prepared a contract giving his company 70% ownership. He mentioned someone named James from Quantum Solutions. Professor Daniels went silent for a moment. James Harrington, you know him, by reputation. Quantum Solutions has been acquiring smaller research labs and patents for years. They're known for buying promising technology and either exploiting it exclusively or shelving it to protect their existing products. My stomach twisted. Can he block the patent? I asked. Not legally, no, but he could certainly cause delays and complications. We need to move fast. His voice took on a determined edge I'd never heard before. Come to my house tonight. We'll call Martin from Tech Transfer and get ahead of this. 2 hours later, I sat in Professor Daniels' cluttered living room with Martin Weber on speakerphone explaining the situation. This is concerning, Weber said after hearing the details. Not unprecedented, but concerning. Has your father made any direct claims of financial contribution to your research? No, I replied. There was none. I've been on university stipends and grants the entire time. Good, that helps. I hear paper shuffling on his end. But we need to expedite the patent filing. I'll call our outside counsel tonight and have them prioritize your application. We should have everything submitted within 48 hours. That fast? I asked, surprised. When there's potential interference, we don't wait, especially with something this valuable. I've already had preliminary inquiries from 3 major tech companies based on rumor. After the call ended, Professor Daniels made us both tea. He said gently, "This happens more than you think. When research shows commercial promise, all sorts of people come out of the woodwork claiming ownership, even family." He finished, "I never thought they'd try to steal your work. People do surprising things when billions are at stake." The next morning, I received a call from the dean's office requesting an urgent meeting about my research. When I arrived, I found not only the dean, but also the university's general counsel waiting. "We received a concerning call this morning," the dean began without preamble. "Thomas Williams claims to have provided substantial financial and technical support for your quantum research. He's requesting the university acknowledge his company's interest before proceeding with any patent applications." I looked down at the neat stack of papers, my father's confidence radiating across the table. It was the same trap, dressed in different language. Ownership disguised as trust. Betrayal masked as family interest. "You think you can strong-arm me into signing this?" I said quietly. My father leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "I don't think. I know. You've always been naive about the real world, Rose. Patents aren't magic shields. Money, influence, connections. Those decide what survives." Alex shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. My mother stared at her plate. I met my father's eyes, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "The patent's already filed. The university owns it with me. Your threats can't erase that." For the first time, his composure cracked, just slightly, a tightening around his jaw. "You think a timestamp will protect you?" he said, his voice low.
James Harrington has lawyers who eat timestamps for breakfast. I pushed the papers back across the table without opening them. Then let them try, because every attempt you make to undermine me only proves why I can never sign anything with this family again. A silence settled over the room, heavy and suffocating. My mother's hands trembled as she reached for her water glass. Alex finally spoke, his voice subdued. Dad, maybe we're pushing too hard if Rose's research is as valuable as everyone says. Shouldn't we... Enough! My father snapped, his glare silencing him instantly. Then he turned back to me, his tone again calm, cold, deliberate. You're walking away from billions, Rose. Don't expect me to clean up the mess when those companies tear you apart. I stood, gathering my bag. My heart was pounding, but my voice didn't waver. I don't need you to clean up anything. Not anymore. When I reached the doorway, my mother's voice followed me, small and fragile. Rose, please, don't break the family over this. I turned back just long enough to say, I'm not breaking it. I'm just refusing to let you sell me. Then I left, the sound of my father's fury echoing behind me like a closing door. Why are you doing this? I asked quietly. You never cared about my research before. I'm protecting our family's interests, he said, as if it were obvious, including yours, whether you recognize it or not. He pushed the pen toward me. At that exact moment, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I glanced at the screen and my heart skipped a beat. An email from Martin Weber. Subject line, patent approved, urgent news. I opened it immediately, my father impatiently urging me to focus on the papers in front of us. The message was brief, but its meaning thundered through me. The patent examiner had granted special priority because of the groundbreaking nature of my invention. Preliminary approval, record time in the department's history. And most shocking of all, major tech companies were already bidding. Google had opened at $1 billion for licensing rights. $1 billion? For the worthless experiment my father mocked? I looked up at him, still holding the pen expectantly. For the first time, I didn't see the intimidating figure who had haunted my childhood. I saw only a man whose power over me had always existed because I allowed it. Slowly, I smiled. His confidence faltered instantly. I placed my phone on the table, screen facing upward. What's that? He demanded. Patent approval, I replied calmly. Preliminary, but official. And the first bid for licensing rights. I let the silence stretch, then added, $1 billion. His face shifted. Disbelief, then shock, then calculation. He reached for my phone, but I pulled it back. That's impossible, he snapped. Patents take months, sometimes years. Not when they represent a fundamental breakthrough in quantum technology, I countered. The examiner expedited it personally. Lean leaned forward. $1 billion from who? Google. And they're only the first bidder. I turned back to my father. Interesting timing, isn't it? Just as you're asking me to sign away my rights? He recovered quickly. This only proves what I've been saying. Proper business management is essential. Without our family's resources, I achieved this without your help, I cut in, voice steady. In fact, I succeeded despite your constant discouragement. You're being dramatic, he scoffed. I always supported your education. You supported what you could control, I corrected. The moment I chose my own path, you withdrew it. And now that my path has led to success, you want to claim ownership. My mother spoke softly. Rose, your father is just trying to protect you. Business negotiations can be very complicated. Is that what he told you this is about? Protection, not control, not personal gain? She didn't answer, but her eyes flickered toward my father, betraying her doubt. Did you know? I continued, still addressing her, that Dad has been promised a board position at Quantum Solutions if this deal goes through? This isn't about protecting me. It's about his ambition. His face hardened. That's enough. The fact remains that without proper representation, you'll be exploited by these tech companies. You need us. No, I said firmly, I don't. The university has already assembled a negotiation team, patent attorneys, technology specialists, business consultants. They have decades of experience. Universities exploit naive researchers, he argued. They'll claim the lion's share because it happened in their lab. Professor Daniels has informed me that MIT's standard policy grants the inventor a third of all licensing revenues. Far better than the 30% you offered me for my own invention. His tone softened. We're still your family, Rose. Do you really want to create this division between us? Over money? I almost laughed at the hypocrisy. This division isn't mine to own. You created it when you threatened my career, interfered with my patent, and tried to sell my research without my consent. We can work through this, Alex interjected uneasily. Dad, maybe we should reconsider the 70-30 split. Alex, my father snapped, warning in his eyes. But I smiled. You still don't get it. This isn't a negotiation. I'm not signing anything. My patent is approved. I control the rights to my technology. We'll contest it, my father threatened, voice rising. Family contribution, undue influence, all of which will fail. And in the process, you'll have to explain why you're publicly attacking your daughter's achievement instead of celebrating it. That struck home. His reputation meant everything. The university already has a press release ready. Major science journals are running features next week. So your choice is simple. Support me publicly and be seen as the proud father of a scientific pioneer, or fight me and be seen as the man who tried to steal from his own daughter. His face betrayed the calculation. He was searching for leverage and finding none. Think about your legacy, Dad, I said more gently. Do you want to be remembered for building or for taking? The next 2 weeks were a delicate dance. My father, realizing he had no ground, pivoted publicly to play the proud parent. I always knew Rose had extraordinary potential, he told a reporter. Behind the scenes, though, he tried one last maneuver. Through his lawyer, he sent a reconciliation agreement, demanding an advisory role in commercialization and a small percentage of profits for parental support. The university's legal team urged me to reject it. Meanwhile, interest in my quantum stabilization technology exploded. Google's $1 billion was only the start. IBM, Microsoft, the Department of Defense, and multiple international consortiums soon followed. Bids climbed toward $3 billion for exclusive licensing. Professor Daniels guided me through the storm. He told me, don't get distracted by the money. Focus on the science. That's where your true value lies. The university arranged a formal presentation for potential licensees. I would demonstrate the technology, answer questions, prove its worth. The day before the presentation, an unexpected visitor arrived at my lab. Alex. Can we talk? He asked awkwardly, standing in the doorway. I gestured him in, curious. He wanted to apologize, he said, after a long silence, his gaze moving over the equipment with genuine respect. I didn't understand what you were doing here. You thought Dad was right? That it was worthless? He nodded, ashamed. I've been reading about quantum computing since this all happened, trying to understand. It's incredible what you've done. Thank you, I said, touched by his effort. Dad isn't handling this well. He began, then hesitated. Not because of the money. He's impressed by your achievement, Alex admitted, but he can't handle being sidelined. Control has always been his currency. I know, I said quietly, but I can't give him control over this, not after everything. I'm not asking you to, Alex assured me. He hesitated, then added, actually, I came to warn you. He's planning to attend your presentation tomorrow with James Harrington. My stomach tightened. How do you know? I overheard them. Dad's positioning himself as having inside influence with you. Harrington thinks family pressure might give them an edge in the bidding. I blinked at his candor. Why are you telling me this? Alex shifted uncomfortably. Because it's wrong. What they tried to do to you was wrong. I was wrong for going along with it. He met my eyes directly. You deserve the credit for what you've created. His unexpected support brought tears to my eyes. That means a lot, Alex. Really. So, he asked softly, what will you do now? Exactly what I planned, but I'll be ready for them. The next day, the university's largest lecture hall had been transformed for the presentation. Rows of seats were filled with representatives from major tech companies, venture capitalists, government officials, and members of the scientific community. Just as Alex had warned, my father and James Harrington occupied seats in the third row, whispering as I stepped to the podium. I had prepared meticulously, explaining the technology in clear, accessible terms while demonstrating its extraordinary capabilities. When the quantum bits remained entangled for over a full minute, far longer than previously thought possible, the audience gasped audibly. During the question period, Harrington raised his hand. Miss Williams, he began smoothly, given the family resources that supported this research, how do you plan to acknowledge that contribution in your licensing arrangements? The room fell silent. It was a calculated strike, designed to cast doubt on my independence. I smiled politely. Mr. Harrington, all funding for this research is documented in university records. Every dollar came from institutional grants and fellowships, and they will be properly acknowledged. As for family contributions, I'm grateful for the early education that sparked my love of science, though my specific path in quantum physics was not the one my family encouraged. My father's face darkened, but he couldn't respond without looking petty. Afterward, MIT's president took the stage. Dr. Williams's breakthrough represents not just a technological advance, but a paradigm shift in how we approach quantum applications, he declared. We are proud to announce the creation of a new Quantum Technology Institute with Dr. Williams as its founding research director. We are committed to developing this technology responsibly, ensuring appropriate access for researchers worldwide. Flashbulbs exploded as photographers captured the moment. My father approached, extending his hand with a practiced smile. Congratulations, Rose. The family is very proud. I shook his hand, matching his public facade. Thank you for coming, Dad. Later that week, the university finalized licensing agreements with a consortium of tech companies. The deals were carefully structured to prevent monopolization while maximizing both financial return and scientific advancement. My share as primary inventor would amount to more than $300 million over the patent's lifetime. When the news became public, my mother called, her voice more animated than I'd heard in years. Rose, this is extraordinary. I always knew you were special. Did you? I asked gently, because I needed to hear that years ago. There was a long pause. I should have supported you more, she admitted quietly. Standing up to your father, it isn't easy. I know, I said softly, thinking of my own battles. He's not all bad, she continued, just set in his ways, old-fashioned about certain things. Like daughters knowing their place, I suggested. Another pause. Then, to my surprise, she said, that explains it, but it doesn't excuse it. 2 days later, she came to my lab alone. She had never visited before. As she looked around at the equipment and equations, I saw her differently, not just as my father's shadow, but as a woman shaped by compromises. I had dreams too, before I married my father. I was on track to become a partner at my accounting firm. What happened? I asked, though I already guessed. Your father needed support building his business. It made sense for me to step back. She touched a piece of lab equipment carefully. I don't regret raising you and Alex, but sometimes I wonder what might have been. For the first time, I saw her fully, not as complicit, but as someone whose talents had been redirected, whose ambitions had been sacrificed. It didn't excuse her silence, but it helped me understand it. "It's not too late," I told her gently, "to do something for yourself." She smiled sadly.
Perhaps not. As the technology moved into commercial development, I established clear boundaries with my family. My father's attempts to insert himself into business decisions were politely but firmly refused. Over time, he seemed to accept the new reality, though I doubted he had truly changed. Alex, however, surprised me. He began taking night classes and technology management, eager to understand the world I lived in. Not to interfere with your work, he assured me, just to be able to have real conversations about what you do. The final victory came 6 months later at the annual New England Business Leaders Gala. My father had been nominated for Entrepreneur of the Year, an award he'd coveted for decades. I was invited as a rising star in technology innovation. Halfway through the ceremony, the host announced a special recognition. This year, we are honored to present our first Breakthrough Technology Award to Dr. Rose Williams, whose quantum stabilization method has been called the most significant advance in computing this century. As the audience rose in a standing ovation, I walked to the stage. From the podium, I saw my father's face, a mixture of pride, regret, and perhaps recognition. For the first time, I was being celebrated in his world, but entirely on my own terms. "Thank you," I began my speech. "Breakthroughs don't happen in isolation. They require support, resources, and belief." I paused, then made a choice. I'd like to acknowledge my family, who taught me the most important lesson in science and in life, that conventional wisdom should always be questioned, and the most valuable discoveries often come when you forge your own path. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but it was a step towards something new. A relationship built on respect rather than control, on acknowledgement rather than ownership. 1 year after the patent approval, I stood in the gleaming lobby of Williams Quantum Technologies. My company, my name. The headquarters in Cambridge housed state-of-the-art labs and offices for over 100 employees. What began as a basement experiment had become a suite of technologies impacting secure communications, medical imaging, and beyond. I had learned to negotiate, to recognize value, to trust selectively, to maintain control of my vision while delegating execution. Each challenge became a building block in my transformation from overlooked researcher to technology founder. My relationship with Alex evolved most naturally. After finishing his courses, he approached me humbly. "I'd like to earn a position in your company, not as my brother, not through Dad's connections, just based on merit." He started in supply chain management, proving his worth step by step, eventually rising to operations director. More importantly, he became an ally, someone who understood both my scientific world and our family's complicated history. My mother surprised me even more. After our talk in my lab, she enrolled in financial management courses, later launching a small consultancy. "Your father doesn't fully understand," she confided over lunch one day, "but he isn't opposing it either. That's progress." Her small steps toward independence gave me hope that change was possible, even after decades of silence. My father remained the hardest. For months, our conversations were stiff, limited to business-like pleasantries. Then, after my feature in Technology Review's Innovators Under 35 issue, I received a copy with a handwritten note. "Impressive work. Your determination reminds me of someone I know. Dad." It wasn't an apology, but from him, it was a seismic shift. I called him that evening. "I got your note," he said gruffly, though they oversimplified the business implications. "That's what tech magazines do," I replied, smiling at his predictability. For the first time, we spoke for 15 minutes as equals, about strategy, growth, and leadership. It became a pattern. Careful conversations that skirted old wounds but acknowledged my success. 6 months later, he suffered a minor heart attack. Seeing him in hospital bed, frail and mortal, I realized his attempts to control me had been shaped by his upbringing. Fathers commanding, daughters complying. Success measured narrowly. "I need to reduce stress," he admitted quietly.
Maybe delegate more at work, I suggested. He nodded. I've been thinking about succession. Alex has good instincts, but he seems happy at your company. He is, I confirmed. He's found his path there. My father met my eyes. As you found yours, despite me. It was the closest he had ever come to an apology. I accepted it for what it was, the beginning of reckoning. As my company grew, I created the Williams Foundation for Women in Quantum Science, offering scholarships and mentorship. When asked why I focused on women, I answered simply, I know firsthand how easily women's capabilities are underestimated in technical fields. Sometimes the biggest barrier isn't ability, but having someone believe you belong in the room. The first scholarship recipients soon published research of their own. Their successes filled me with a fulfillment rivaling any of my patents. 2 years later, at the opening of our new research campus, my family stood together for photographs. My father, semi-retired and quieter after his health scare. My mother, confident in her second career. Alex, respected as an operations leader on his own merit. We weren't the flawless family of holiday cards, but we had forged something more authentic. Connection through hardship, respect through honesty. That evening, my father approached me, hesitant. I was wrong, he said simply, about your research, about what you could achieve. Looking at him, I no longer saw the intimidating figure of my youth, but an aging man facing his limits. Thank you for saying that, I replied softly. He wanted to control everything, business, family, legacy. I thought I knew best. Clearly, I didn't. We all have blind spots, I offered. He chuckled. Your mother points out mine more often these days. Good for her, I said, smiling. Years later, on the 5th anniversary of my patent approval, I delivered a keynote at the International Quantum Computing Conference. Looking out at the audience of scientists, entrepreneurs, and students, I closed with what my journey had truly taught me. The most valuable discovery I've made isn't written in my patent. It's this. Your worth isn't determined by whether others recognize it. Breakthroughs happen when you trust your own measurements over external valuations. Sometimes the people closest to you will be the last to see your potential. Don't let their limitations define your possibilities. The standing ovation that followed wasn't a victory over my family, but a victory over the self-doubt their betrayal once planted. I had come full circle, from a young scientist desperate for validation to a leader secure in her own worth. And as I signed off that night, I left the audience with one final truth. Sometimes the most important signature isn't on a contract. It's the one you put on your own self-worth.